Before we begin, I invite the interpreters from the Community Language Cooperative to provide instructions as to how our Spanish-speaking community members can access the interpretation of this forum.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Andrea. I'm here with the Community Language Cooperative. My colleague Valentina will be joining us soon, and we're going to be providing simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish so that we can practice language justice and people can hear in the language of their heart. In a couple of seconds after I'm done saying this message in Spanish, we're going to turn on the interpretation, and you're going to see a globe at the bottom of your screen, or if you have updated your Zoom recently, you're not going to see the globe, but you're going to see 3 little dots over it says more, and you're going to be able to select your preferred language there. Please make sure that if you speak a language other than English, you click those 3 dots and you select your preferred language. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Andrea, estoy aquí con la Community Language Cooperative. Mi colega Valentina nos va a acompañar en unos segundos y vamos a brindar interpretación simultánea en inglés y en español para que podamos hablar y escuchar en el idioma de nuestro corazón y practicar la justicia del lenguaje. Cuando aprendamos de interpretación, van a ver un globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla donde van a poder seleccionar su idioma preferido. Si actualizaron su Zoom recientemente, van a ver 3 punticos donde dice más y ahí encontrarán la función de interpretación. Asegúrense de seleccionar su idioma preferido. For the presenters today, please remember to speak at a conversational pace. Spanish is 25% longer than English. It will take me 25% longer to say what you're saying in English into Spanish. So please try to stretch your words. If at some point you're speaking too quickly, I am going to turn on my camera. I am going to make this sign. This just means please stretch your words so that I can catch up. And if you are still speaking too fast, I'm going to let in the chat that I need you to slow down a little bit. Other than that, we are ready to start interpretation. Host, you may start interpretation now.
I think she's ready. Welcome to the State Senate District 18 Candidate Forum, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. My name is Josephine Porter. I am a proud member of the League, and I'm pleased to serve as moderator for tonight's forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. For over 100 years, we have encouraged informed and active participation in government, and we have influenced public policy through education and advocacy. To remain nonpartisan, the League never supports or opposes political candidates or political parties. We are pleased tonight to have as our Spanish language interpreter the Community Language Cooperative. Now to the forum. The Colorado Senate is the upper house of the Colorado General Assembly and is composed of 35 members elected from single-member districts, with each district having a population of about 165,000 people. A senator is elected to a 4-year term and is limited to serving 2 consecutive terms. The legislative session begins no later than the second Wednesday in January and lasts up to 120 calendar days. District 18 includes the city of Boulder, including a segment of Boulder County east primarily to 95th Street and the outlying Boulder County communities of Louisville, Superior, Gun Barrel, and Niwot. The format for tonight's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. We will then ask the candidates as many questions as time permits. Questions have been submitted electronically to the League by the community and been reviewed by our League of Women Voters volunteer screeners. For most questions, each candidate will have up to 1 minute. However, I may expand the time to answer depending on the question. We will finish with 1 minute closing statements. Tonight's forum participants are in the order they appear on the ballot: Judy Amable, and Gary Swing. Now to the opening statements and questions. We will begin with opening statements from Judy Amabile. Candidate Amabile.
Thank you so much to the League for putting on this event, and thank you to everybody who's here tonight. I'm Judy Amabile, and I'm currently the state rep for House District 49. And in this election, I am running to be the state senator from Senate District 18. I moved to Boulder to go to college in 1975. I have 3 kids who were born at Boulder Community Hospital who are adults now. And I spent 25 years running a manufacturing business. I joined the legislature in part motivated by my business experience, but mostly by the experience of being a parent and being a parent to a son with serious mental illness. And that has been a big driver for all of the things, not all of the things, but for a lot of the things that I've been working on in the legislature. I feel like I have done a good job of representing Boulder County, and I would love for you to send me to the Senate. Thank you.
Candidate Swing. You need to unmute. Unmute. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gary Swing, and I'm from the Unity Party of Colorado. The legitimate purpose of elections is for people to elect candidates who represent their values. Winner-take-all elections deny people a meaningful, effective vote. Political minorities are excluded from representation. Most single-member districts are dominated by one political party. Only 2 political parties are represented in Congress. Out of 7,383 state legislators in the United States, none were elected as members of the nation's 3rd or 4th largest political parties. By contrast, New Zealand has 6 political parties in its national parliament. Norway has 10. Denmark has 15. 95 nations use proportional representation voting to secure fair, inclusive multi-party representation. Each party wins seats in proportion to its share of the vote. While the US has just 2 parties, post-apartheid South Africa has 14 parties in its national parliament. More than 98% of South African voters can elect representatives of their choice.
For our first question, we'll begin with candidate Swing, and that is, what are your top priorities for the next legislative session, and what do you think is the single most important issue for this district?
My top priorities as a state legislator would be to introduce a bill to change the way that we elect the state legislature, to use hybrid proportional representation as proposed by the election reform group, Best Democracy. I think overall the most important issue is ecological overshoot, which means that we are living beyond sustainable means. We're not living within the planetary boundaries that allow life to exist on Earth. Human population has grown to the point where if the average person on Earth consumed as much as the average person in the United States does now, it's estimated that the Earth could not sustain a population of more than 1.5 billion people. We're at 8 billion people now. Third, I would support a universal healthcare system based on a single payer model.
Candidate Amabile.
Yes, thank you. So I think I've been out knocking on doors since May, and what I hear in different neighborhoods is different. So in Boulder, in the single family neighborhoods, people are very concerned about climate and environment. And that is a really important value for this community. When I knock on doors out in the mobile home parks in Boulder County, what I hear overwhelmingly is that people are concerned about affordability and their ability to live in this community. And that has to do with the cost of housing, with low wages, and with the cost of healthcare and of other factors as well. And so I think those are 2 of the biggest things that I plan to focus on. And then I will just also say that I have been heavily involved in the intersection of the criminal justice system and mental health care.
The next question, we'll start with candidate Amabile. And this, we're gonna do 90 seconds, so you have 90 seconds to respond. How, and it addresses these issues that you just talked about. How would you address the ever escalating cost of housing in Colorado? Should the state play a role in providing funding for affordable housing? If so, what sources should be tapped to fund for affordable housing?
So housing is a crisis in our state and across the country. We still haven't recovered from the Great Depression in 2008, and when a lot of building got shut down. There are a lot of different approaches to it. Last year, we ran some bills that mandated certain things at the local level. The bill that I ran was about allowing accessory dwelling units in single-family zones. And that creates a more affordable unit in the neighborhood in which it's built. And it also allows for renters to live side by side with homeowners all over our city. And I think that that has a lot of beneficial side effects. We also ran a bill about creating transit-oriented development. So building more housing on transit corridors so that people can use the transit that's there, and that has beneficial effects for our environment and also creates more housing. And so, yes, I think the state has a role. I also think the county has a role. The city has a role. And we have to be creative about the things we do. And this year, if I'm elected, I am looking forward to working on homeownership affordability as opposed to rental affordability. We need to do both, but we need to give people a ladder into generational wealth. And we often do that with homeownership.
Candidate Swing.
I support allowing higher residential density to address the affordable housing crisis and ending the state prohibition on local rent control. We should take advantage of new federal guidelines that allow states to use Medicaid to pay for housing and for food. I would advocate for tenant rights and protections. The high cost of housing is the #1 cause of homelessness.
The next question, we'll start with candidate Swing. Were you finished? I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
90 seconds.
No, this will be back to 1 minute. It's a parallel question to that. Is the rising cost of home insurance, is there anything that the legislature should address to solve or work on the problem with rising costs of home insurance? What can be done and how would it be funded?
I'm not really familiar with this issue, so I don't have an answer to that at this time. I'm interested in learning more about it.
Candidate Amable.
Yeah, so home insurance has gone dramatically up in Colorado and across the country as a result of climate change because we are experiencing way more disasters. In Colorado, wildfire and hail have really caused our premiums to go up. Last year, we ran a bill that said we have to look at what are the ways that we can bring the cost of insurance down. And that result of that investigation is about to come out. And this year we'll run some legislation that is responsive to what we learned. But we also have to make sure that consumers are protected and that they are getting what they pay for when they buy homeowners insurance. And that's been of particular interest to me because of the Marshall Fire and because I have so many constituents who are affected by that. And we have run several bills now that work on that. We also have to talk about availability, but I don't think I have time for that.
The next question, we'll start with candidate Amable, and we're going to do 90 seconds again for this. What are the most important legislative actions needed to better support children and families in Colorado? Should the state play a role in providing all Coloradians access to basic needs, including food, housing, and healthcare? So absolutely, we have to do better for our families.
and working families in Colorado are really struggling. We also have a pretty broken child welfare system where we are diverting too many kids into foster care and not actually addressing the reasons why their family can't keep them and be safe with their own kids. And we have shifted away into this, we have shifted towards this family first model. And I think that is the right direction to go, but we still haven't done a good enough job of supporting the whole family. The other thing we have is a mass incarceration. And so many people who are incarcerated are then completely cut off from their children. So we last year ran a bill, or the year before, that said you have to provide opportunities for kids to visit their incarcerated parent, and for that incarcerated parent to participate in decisions about that child's future. And that is going to make a big difference. We also made phone calls from DOC, the Department of Corrections, free, and we're easing into that. So next year, the phone calls should all be free so that parents can stay connected to their kids. We also worked on what happens for postpartum and pregnant women when they are in the criminal justice system, to make sure that we're at least considering alternatives to criminal justice.
Candidate Swing.
I support livable wage laws that can be set at the local level to account for the cost of living. I also support a guaranteed universal income program. This has been proposed at the national level, but it can also be done at the state level, and there are pilot projects in local communities for it. Single-payer healthcare system will also help to provide for basic human needs. Thank you.
The next question, and we'll begin with candidate Swing. What do you consider a fair and equitable tax system for Colorado? What changes would you make in the current system, including revenue sources?
I'm aware that there's some interest in instituting a progressive income tax in Colorado, and I haven't looked at that in detail. I have been an advocate for universal basic income and for a carbon tax system that would account for the environmental impact of goods and services and costs of and true cost pricing for those goods. I understand that in itself is regressive, but providing for a guaranteed minimum income gives people the freedom and the income to spend the money as they choose under a modified market system.
Candidate Amabile?
Yeah, I agree with Gary about the progressive income tax. That's something that we really need to do. It has to go to a vote of the people because of Tabor. It's not something that the legislature can just make happen. But I think that would be a very strong step in the right direction. I think we preclude in our Constitution cities enacting a real estate transfer tax. And I think that would be a very good thing for us to allow local governments to do. When your home goes up in value dramatically, you really didn't do anything to earn that. And so taking a modest amount of that gain and putting it towards things like affordable housing would make a lot of sense. And I think we should also be looking at some form of wealth tax.
The next question will begin with candidate Amabile. We've seen an influx of migrants to Colorado, especially in the Denver area. Should there be aid from the state level rather than depleting this funds of the localities and the cities bearing the brunt of these costs? If you agree with that, how is it best handled and funded?
I completely agree that we should be helping people. People are people. It doesn't really matter how they arrived here. It doesn't matter what their status is. We should be helping people who are in desperate need. And yes, the state has a role in that, and we did allocate some resources for that last year, and local governments also play a role in that. And this may be a temporary blip, but it also might not be. Again, because of climate change, we may see migrant waves coming from now until I don't know when. And so we have to figure out what is a good strategy for making sure that people are cared for. But we also have a huge homeless population, and those people need care too. And I don't know that it's that helpful to say, this one group gets this and this other group gets that. I think we have to figure out a strategy for all of the people who are in the very worst dire straits to make sure that they get the help they need.
Candidate Swing.
Freedom of travel and migration is a natural human right, regardless of borders drawn on maps. All people must be treated fairly and equitably under the law, regardless of their citizenship status. Reasonable paths to asylum, legal residency, and citizenship should be available to immigrants. I would support legislation to provide legal representation for residents experiencing immigration issues who cannot afford to hire their own attorneys. I support state funding for education for immigrant communities, as for everyone else.
The next question will begin with candidate Swing. We're moving into education now. What is your position on ballot measure number 80? That would create a constitutional right to school choice and equal opportunity for K through 12. In effect, this measure would, as a constitutional right, require that the legislature allocate public funds for private schools and homeschooling.
I support public funding for education at all levels, from early childhood education through post-secondary education, without charging tuition to in-state students. I haven't looked at the language of that ballot initiative. I am in favor of school choice within the public school system, possibly homeschooling. I'm not in favor of public funding being used for religious indoctrination purposes. We should have a wall of separation between church and state in the United States. Children do not have the freedom to choose to reject religious education. And I don't think that we should be using public funding to enforce some particular religious doctrine.
Candidate Amabile.
So I agree with Gary. Can I call you Gary, or should I say Mr. Swing?
Please call me Gary. Thank you, Judy.
I think ballot measure 80 is a complete and utter disaster, and everyone should vote no on it. It does open up the door for religious schools to get public funding, for private schools to get public funding. It is very unclear who's going to pay for what and when, and it potentially allows you to choose to go anywhere, and for the state to have to pay for that. There will be lawsuits after lawsuits because of the vague and sloppy way that it was written, and it will decimate our public schools. I also believe in choice. I think we have a lot of good choice here in Boulder County and all around the state, not so much in rural parts of the state, but choice isn't about taking public funds and going to some school that might be allowed to discriminate or won't take kids with special needs, and vote no.
Thank you. The next question will start with candidate Amabile. Do you support the new school finance formula that was passed this last session? Why or why not? And are there any other changes to school funding that you would support?
Yes, I support the new school funding formula. I think it is more equitable, but it also will impact Boulder, where we have 25% of our students are living in poverty. And we will get less money for Boulder Valley schools as a result of the school funding formula, but I still think that on balance, it is more fair. The problem is we need to infuse new and more money into school finance so that we can do a better job of paying our teachers a living wage and of supporting our students in their learning. So we obviously need to do more, but we also last year did get rid of the budget stabilization factor. So we did put a lot of money last year into school finance and into schools. This year is going to be a really tough budget year, and I'm really glad we got that done last year.
Candidate Swing.
I support Judy's position on this. My understanding is that the Tabor Amendment creates obstacles to funding necessary services in Colorado. We need more funding for the public school system. I think we should work on reducing class sizes, increasing salaries for educators in Colorado, and extending public education funding all the way from pre-K through post-secondary education.
The next question will begin with Candidate Swing. Do you think the legislature has any role in legislating the process or parameters for removing books from schools or public libraries? Removal requests seem to be aimed at harming the BIPOC and LGBTQ plus communities.
I'm not in favor of censorship. I think it's important to have respect for people from different communities, including LGBTQIA communities, people from different backgrounds. I do not support censorship of books in libraries. Libraries should be there for educational purposes.
Candidate Amable.
So I also don't support censorship, and I don't support book banning. But the state did last year try to pass a bill that says you can't do that. And that turned out to be a very complicated thing, which inserted the state into the middle of something that we didn't get it quite right. And that bill didn't make it. And I think that was right. And I do think that local school districts are going to make these choices for what books are going to go with what grade levels. I do think we probably do need to come back at this and make sure that we're not targeting different groups and saying these groups you can't learn about. So it's more complicated in that it seems it's a good slogan to say, I don't want book banning. But there are age levels when certain things are appropriate and other things aren't.
The next question will start with Candidate Amable. This is about elections. Would you be open to possible new election systems that would lead to a more representative legislature? Changes might involve larger districts with several representatives from each district and a different voting method, such as approval voting or ranking method to determine the winners.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk for a long time about this, and maybe sometime, Gary, you and I could sit down and talk about it, because I know this is your issue. I am in favor of different voting methods. We have something on the ballot this year that would change the way we vote in Colorado, would have an open primary where anybody could get on the ballot, and then ranked choice voting for the general election. And I have been taking a good hard look at that, but I actually have been hearing a lot of pushback from all different angles. Like, some people don't think that's quite the right change, and other people think that will take away power. And I hear my fellow legislators saying that will make it harder for us to run. So I think what we really need to focus on is, how do we enfranchise the most voters? And how do we make sure that people have real choice in every election? And I don't know what that answer is.
Candidate Swing.
I'm strongly opposed to Proposition 131, especially the open primaries aspect, which will keep most independent and alternative party candidates off the general election ballot. I advocate electing a unicameral state legislature by hybrid proportional representation, as proposed by the election reform group Best Democracy. That would propose to eliminate the state Senate, increase the number of state representatives to 185. 7 representatives would be elected from each of 22 districts using proportional ranked voting. A candidate would need 1/8 of the vote to win a district seat. 80% of representatives would be elected from multi-member districts. The other 20% would be elected from open party lists. Overall representation would be proportional to the share of the party list vote. And to make the system more inclusive, party list seats would compensate for disproportionate results from district elections. A Best Democracy proposes a 3% threshold to win seats from the party list vote, which should provide representation for 98% of voters in Colorado.
The next question will start with candidate Swing. What measures would you support for Colorado to deal with the climate crisis and to work toward climate resilience?
Elected officials should support full compliance with international climate agreements at all levels, including the Group of 20 and the Conference on Partners of Parties. All levels of government must invest in the infrastructure needed to deal with drought, wildfires, and floods resulting from climate change. We need to transition from fossil fuels and nuclear energy to alternative energy resources such as wind, solar, hydroelectric on a small scale, and geothermal power, and also invest in greater energy efficiency, transition from fossil fueled automobiles to electric powered vehicles with energy that's generated by renewable sources.
Candidate Amabile.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. And I think I will just say that we have been doing that at the legislature. We have been passing bills that are around climate, and not just climate, but also environment and pollution and environmental justice, because we're burdening the people who have the least with the most of the climate effects. And we really need to make sure that we're adjusting that. The other thing I've worked on is resilience. So how do we make sure that we're ready for the disasters that are hitting us and doing the best we can to navigate those and to make sure people have what they need in the face of those climate disasters. And we need to keep doing that. We also need, as we're transitioning away from a fossil fuel economy, we need to provide employment opportunities, retraining, and other things to support the workers who are going to be displaced.
The next question will start with candidate Amabile. Do improvements need to be made through legislative action to improve mental and behavioral health support and care? And what is the most important actions? What are the most important actions that can be taken to improve the mental health care and behavioral health care?
Yeah. Do we ever? Yes, we need, there's a lot of work to be done. And what we really, I want to just say, there are two kinds of disease. One is things like depression and anxiety that are low acuity mental illnesses that are serious, but are very different from schizophrenia, schizoaffective, bipolar with psychotic episodes, because the treatment is very different for people who have those illnesses and are not being treated. We need a continuum of care that starts with more hospital beds where people can go and actually recover, spend enough time there to get better. Or some people who aren't going to get better, a place for them to be for as long as they need it. Then we need residential step down. Then we need things like supportive housing and wraparound services. And we have that in some piecemeal way, but we don't have a system that has the full continuum of care. And if we want to get people out of jail, and if we want to get people off the street, we have to have that.
The next question will begin with candidate Amabile. Can homelessness and drug addiction
I don't think Gary got to answer that question.
I'm very sorry, I lost count. Sorry, Gary, please go ahead.
That's fine. I appreciate Judy's perspective on this. I know that this is an area of expertise and strong interest for her, and I support her position on this. It's not particularly an issue that I'm very familiar with myself, but I agree that we need to enhance mental health and substance abuse treatment for all ages, especially among young people in Colorado.
Along those lines, and we'll begin with candidate Swing, can homelessness and drug addiction be reduced under existing laws? Or are there is there additional legislation that is needed to address those issues?
Um, I think that homelessness can probably be addressed under existing laws. But I think it's also important to increase the availability of shelters and transitional housing for the homeless community, to get people off of the street. Drug addiction is a factor, but the primary issue is people not being able to afford housing. So a guaranteed minimum income, universal health care factor into this. And it is a big issue in Colorado, and it's important that we deal with it effectively and get people back into housing.
Candidate Amable.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of passing new laws. It's a matter of having the will to put the resources into the right things to solve the problem. And I don't actually think in the long run that costs more money, because right now what we're doing is we're consigning people to the street. People are overdosing and dying. People are using our emergency rooms and other things like that that are way more costly than if we would address the actual situation that they're facing. And we need to approach this thing with compassion. And to a large extent, we haven't been doing that. We have to say, hey, these are people who need help. And we need to get people into treatment if they need treatment. If they're, people are addicted to things like methamphetamine and fentanyl, and they're not going to be able to kick that habit on their own. It's not a moral issue. It's not a moral failing. They need help. And we have got to provide, again, the continuum of care, supply that help.
I'm going to ask two lightning round questions, so there'll be 30 seconds to respond. And these will be your last two questions before your closing statements. The first question is regarding ballot measure 79, 89. What is your position on ballot proposal 89 titled Right to Abortion? And we will begin with candidate Amable.
I'm
30 seconds.
I'm a strong supporter of ballot measure 89.
Same here. I support constitutional amendments at the state and federal levels to protect abortion rights.
The next question is on ballot measure 127. Ballot measure 127 would prohibit intentionally killing, wounding, pursuing, or entrapping a mountain lion, bobcat, or lynx, or discharging or releasing any deadly weapon at a mountain lion, bobcat, or lynx. What is your position?
I support a ban on trapping and hunting mountain lions in Colorado.
Candidate Amable.
I support the ballot measure also, but I will say that it turns out it is more complicated than we maybe originally thought. And we're seeing some unintended consequences with the wolf reintroduction. And it does take some kind of management, and we have to be thoughtful about the way we do it. But yes, I also support the ballot measure.
Now we'll go to closing statements, and we'll begin with candidate Amable. You have 1 minute.
So thank you so much for organizing this. And Gary, it's a pleasure to be on the Zoom with you, because we haven't really met each other. I am a pragmatic legislator, and I will continue to do that if I'm elected to the Senate. I will work with anybody who has a good idea about how to help people in Colorado. I'm not a hyper-partisan. I'm a Democrat. I'm pretty progressive, but I am willing to make compromises and reach across the aisle to get things done. And I don't think that anybody has a lock on good ideas. And I listen, I ask tough questions. I want to understand problems fully, and I want to come up with good solutions. And I hope you'll elect me to the Senate so I can continue to do the work that I've been doing.
Candidate Swing.
Thank you also for inviting me to participate in this forum. It's nice to meet you as well, Judy. In closing, in 1776, John Adams wrote that a representative assembly should be in miniature an exact portrait of the people at large. It should think, feel, reason, and act like them. Proportional representation is designed to disperse power and provide fair representation for everyone. In 1994, Bishop Desmond Tutu said, "The system of proportional representation ensures that virtually every constituency will have a hearing in the national and provincial legislatures." 95 nations use proportional representation to secure fair, inclusive representation for diverse populations. Nations that use party list systems of proportional representation to elect legislators generally have higher voter turnout, better representation of women and ethnic minorities in government, more political parties in government, higher standards of living, and stronger environmental protections than nations that use winner-take-all voting methods.
On behalf of the League, I would like to thank our candidates, not only for your participation in tonight's forum, but also your participation in the democratic process. Running for office and serving as an elected official is hard work, and we appreciate your efforts. A huge thank you will go to the League's 2024 Platinum Level election sponsors. That's Premier Members Credit Union and Wana Brands. And finally, to the Boulder County voters who are participating as viewers and watching this on our YouTube channel. It's up to all of us to make sure we respect and work to protect our democratic processes. Too many people have struggled to win these rights for us not to use them. And it starts with being an informed and active voter. Before signing off, I'd like to alert voters that tonight's forum, as well as many others, are available on the League's website, www.lwvbc.org. And we have a YouTube also for League of Women Voters, Boulder County, and vote411.org. Vote 411 is the League's premier informational voting guide that supplies nonpartisan information on state and local candidates, ballot issues and questions, and much, much more. Resources available on Vote 411 are available in both English and Spanish. The League of Women Voters of Boulder County works throughout the year to help empower voters and defend democracy. If you want to lend a hand, lend your time, lend your skills to encourage civil engagement for all people in a nonpartisan manner, please join us. All the information you need is at lwvbc.org. I hope everyone has a great evening, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.